The Mercedes 109, 100, and 112 air suspension valve explained. So this is the front left air suspension. Well, is it the front left? No, it's the rear air suspension valve from a W109 300 SEL. And today we're going to talk about this valve and what everything on it means, because there are a lot of people who don't understand these things very well. And I remember years ago I was talking to a friend of mine who said that he was scared to death of the air suspension because he said he didn't understand why the valves did what they did and what they were supposed to do and all sorts of things. But really, this is the heart of the suspension system. People are scared of the airbags failing, but an air suspension bag failure is easy to spot. These things are really what I think scare people. And you know, you're probably wondering where we got this rebuilt. Well, this was done by Martin Worminghausen at 600 air suspension, and Martin does really good work. You know, he's probably the only guy that I would trust with these things. But let's dive into how this thing works. So if you look at the valve, the first things you're going to see are the letters A, B, E. And if you look at the back, you'll see them too. E, B, A, backwards. So what the E stands for is Ein, E-I-N, which is the German word for in. And then Aus, A, is the German word for out. So E is where the air pressure comes in. A is where the excess pressure escapes. Then you ask, what is B? Well, B, I don't know the word in German, but I always, in my mind, made the B stand for bellows or bags, because it goes to the airbag or the air bellows, which they refer to them as in the service literature. And so you should always have pressure coming into E from the engine. You should always have pressure leaving A when the car gets up to full ride height. And then you should always have pressure going out of B into the bag before it comes out of A. The reason is because you want the valve to pump up before it starts exhausting. And what happens is when the chassis of the car falls down, this is actually in the wrong position, by the way. The chassis of the car comes down. Let's pretend we're mounted upside down in one of these things. It's going to go into this position, this fill position, where all the air pressure gets directed into the airbag. And then as the car starts to level off and these two holes align, there's a hole here and a hole here, you'll find that it starts to dump pressure. And so another thing happens too, when if you go over a really big bump and this arm comes down, it'll actually release pressure, sending it into the A side, causing less pressure on the bag, helping to counteract a body roll if it goes down. Or if you roll into a turn and this gets pushed up, it stops pressure from going out the exhaust and it stiffens the bag, counteracting body roll. Very fascinating stuff. You're probably wondering what this port is. So this port right here, and if you, by the way, if you have an early 300 SE sedan, maybe if there are any of you out there, I always explain this port to people like this. When you pull the air suspension rod or control cable and the car goes all the way up to maximum air height, air pressure is coming in from here. Now this is really fascinating because this is sort of like a direct bypass where you basically you might have some exhaust, but this is like going like from here straight to the bag, where you just get maximum pressure and the bags inflate all the way. Now let's look at some of the ways that these things can fail. First of all, there are O-rings in here, and there's an O-ring on the end of these anodized fittings that can leak. These O-rings are a special O-ring. They're not just any O-ring. They're designed by Mercedes, and they fit neatly inside that hole. And what you want to make sure of is that that O-ring is not squashed, deformed, or missing or covered in corrosion. The other thing you want to make sure of is that periodically you check the tightness of your lines, because your lines can come loose. And if your lines are coming loose, then you know, you might maybe just want to periodically check them, or maybe, I mean, I've had people put a little bit of blue thread locker on them. I personally don't recommend it, but if you have one that keeps repeatedly coming loose, you need to make sure that you don't have like an overpressure situation from your air pump. Now, they can also get loose here. These two screws for the extra height setting can come loose. I had one car where they were loose and it was leaking a little bit. This plug can come loose. And if you have an internal leak, sometimes you may see bubbles coming from where that little yellow dot is. But for the most part, the leaks on these things are almost never on the outside. Once you've done all those checks, then you start checking the shaft for leaks. The way that these valves work, sorry, I know this is boring, even I'm falling asleep, but you need to know about this. The way these valves work is just because you don't have any external leaks doesn't mean you can't have an internal leak. How do we know we have an internal leak? Well, the car starts losing height, either in the rear axle or in the left side, which has a separate valve, or in the right side, which has a separate valve. If you are seeing one of the front corners go down, then you may have an internal leak or an external leak. You could have a leak at one of the line fittings or a leak at the bag, but if you've eliminated all that stuff, then it means the valve is leaking internally. Now, internal leaks can go away under two conditions. If you start using the car more, the valves inside these things, because they have intake and exhaust valves, just like an engine does, but not shaped like an engine, but they have intake and exhaust valves, and those valves are not supposed to leak. So if you start using the car more, sometimes they'll go away, but sometimes these things need alcohol because, you know, there's an alcohol reservoir in these. If you fill the system with alcohol, guess what happens? Not only does it pull moisture out, and moisture can get in the lines and get on the valve seats and cause rust, but they'll also sort of clean the valves, and the valves will start working and lubricate it. So, you know, I know alcohol is not a great lubricant, but it's better than dryness. And alcohol will sometimes free things up that are stuck, and because it's a solvent. And that's one of the reasons you always want to make sure your alcohol level is up. And initially, Mercedes said that they didn't want to have alcohol all year round, just when it was really cold, so the valves wouldn't freeze. Well, later on, and this is something that Martin has said too, you should always run alcohol. And if you're in a humid climate like Florida, you really need the alcohol to pull moisture out of the system, because the Florida climate, or even the whole East Coast of the United States climate, has so much humidity in it that these lines will get filled with rust and start to go bad. And the rust particles are really what kill them. So on the back valve, there's where the inlet fitting goes, there's a U fitting at the I or the E that goes down like this, and in the bottom of that U, water can get trapped and rust and cause limited inflation pressure to the rear valve. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video and you found it really useful, please like, share, and subscribe this video. And for more great videos on the Mercedes air suspension cars, you can go through our back catalog for the 109, 112, and 100 chassis. Or you can also go to Martin Werminghausen's website, 600airsuspension.com. He has some great videos where he goes into in-depth discussions about these valves and where they fail. And you know, no matter what I do or how much I know, I really can't do justice to what Martin knows about these things. He spent a long time trying to figure them out. But one thing I will say is once these valves are rebuilt and working right, they're very reliable. In fact, they are so reliable that I would consider them to be probably more reliable than, say, a modern air suspension system on like a W220 or 221 S-Class. So even when they're worn out, they work. They may leak down when you park the car, but absolute and total failure of these things usually only occurs when they've been sitting for years and the valves have gotten rusted inside. So that's how good they are. And remember, they use air, and air is all around us. It's not hydraulic fluid, which you have a finite amount of. The system can always take in, filter, and process and pump more air. So as long as the engine's running and the air pump is turning, your car won't collapse unless an airbag explodes. And if you're not maintaining your 109 and you let the airbags get to the point where they explode, you're not doing it right, okay? Anyway, we'll see you in the next video. Enjoy working on your classic Mercedes.